Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Welcome and good evening, everyone, to Indigenous Achievement Week. The Health Science Colleges of Medicine and Nursing is honored to have a presentation by our knowledge keepers on health and Indigenous knowledge. As we gather here today, I acknowledge that we live and work on treaties 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place, and we reaffirm our relationship with one another. I appreciate the gift of the land and what it affords me: shelter, food, medicine, education, language, community, relationships, learning, and sharing. Today, we're here to share with each other, and we have with us two knowledge and language keepers whom we dearly appreciate and honor at this time. I'd like to warmly welcome our knowledge and language keepers, Louise Halfe and Jeff Wastesicoot, to explore and share aspects of health through ceremony and language in this presentation. Thank you in advance for your generous sharing. I'd also like to welcome Val from the College of Medicine, Gina and Kathleen from the College of Nursing, Charlene from the ASC, Donna, John, and others from the ASC. To our attendees, thank you for coming. Without you, our attendance or event would just not be the same. Thank you, everyone. I will now read a short bio of our presenters. Louise Bernice Halfe, sky dancer, was raised on Saddle Lake Reserve and attended Blue Quills Residential School. She graduated with a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Regina and completed 2 years of Nishi training in St. Albert's Nishi Institute. Ms. Halfe serves on various committees throughout Canada and provides services with OPIC, an elder circle that works with apprehended children and their families. In 2005, she served as Saskatchewan's second Poet Laureate. She's a Canadian Parliamentary Poet Laureate for 2021 to 2022. She's widely recognized for weaving Cree language and teachings into her works. Her books, Bare Bones and Feathers, Blue Marrow, The Crooked Good, and Burning in This Midnight Dream have all received numerous accolades and awards. Louise Halfe has received honorary degrees from Wilfrid Laurier University, the University of Saskatchewan, and Mount Royal University. She's married and has 2 adult children and 3 grandsons. Jeff comes from Pimik-Amak Cree Nation. Please forgive me, said with lots of respect, but I don't know the language. He has served as a language consultant and knowledge keeper for many years. Jeff continues to dedicate much of his time to helping people overcome personal challenges through ceremonies, traditional medicines, and counseling. He has dedicated his life to the preservation of the Nihi-Yao language and culture. Jeff recognizes the spirit within the tongue as he interprets the parables within his language. He's recognized and acknowledged in the First Nations community as a spiritual leader and traditional healer. Jeff's life experiences include time spent in residential school and foster homes in Canada and the United States. Memories of the time spent with his grandparents, Johnston Blacksmith and Mary North, prior to entering the residential school system and foster care system, brought some solace during troubling times away from home. It was these memories that prompted his return to his community and his people, and the teaching of his grandparents and other elders among them. Jeff was reintroduced to the ways of the Nihi-Hao upon his return. The experience of residential school and numerous foster homes suppressed the language of his birth, and he had to reclaim it over time. His determination to reclaim the language and ways of his grandparents resulted in a proficiency that garnered recognition as an interpreter and language consultant. This recognition drew Jeff into work of the First Nation leaders and elders throughout Canada. The stories told to him in the Nihi-Yao language through ceremony and consult with the elders remain, and he in turn continues to promote this knowledge with other nations throughout Canada. Jeff is married, has adult children and grandchildren. It is our absolute pleasure to have them share with us. We want to welcome them warmly, and we just look forward to learning from you.
Danzatoyan ang tutemat penyas ni petagote ke pentutoya nos kagisada ebaya metenihaya aya tansum no tetuan ayam ewawan spesial mana dansi se no tetuan maga metode kadage tamano ate witap nothing stairs si spehe sagehat evam sehe pewa party ko atansi se pe kesniyo ya paminayam aya ceremony se pe snama ya netanaya esakiha eba emeto nemina emitehe ke pahida we're having a blast here. I just said I'm so proud to be here today, and I'm so grateful that everybody's come to listen to us. And Jeff is my beloved brother, and he's taught us a lot about ceremonies and language. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really, really honored that you come to listen to us, and hopefully you'll be able to contribute something that you can carry away with your heart and pass it on to others.
Pues está Elisea. Atamiskata ko kispa pego e katen tu tawiak. Kaskawat nuige mga itigawian ni naitagagi siga taswan Jeff Elisea. Isiniga tigawin niya. Ito may winanas ko magpustawin na kutagi sigaw iniibuak. Yung kutaw si tawit matamak, tawit pentu tamak. Sa pag-usi tamatawag tawi, paskitin na may gitewo, tawi utnigegan ukagisirak. Na tuge di pese ni namaguisen tan chumagay si utuniga sigian, ta utuniga taman, maspigi watiko mina tan chuma kitaskino, ese pimatsimagak. Utaw chenima kage tawe mo ngagi namu sige tiatsak ego nanas como nanuch namo ni menta titoe no kawi se mami skochi diana no kavi siga mage ko ni ko kawi aspate mo tawag na ni mo sumpanak no kumpanak wino kagi pewita di ko ge obiskino mage nyo mina anoch negotiation and ask for more. Foremost, I want to thank you for, for the invitation to come and spend this afternoon with you. I foremost give, greetings to each and every one of you that are listening today, that are lending your ears to us. And I also am grateful and give thanks to our Creator for giving us another day of life. And I just want to begin by sharing this knowledge that has been afforded to me by my ancestors, my elders, and so forth. And it's not, I really highly depend on what was told to me by my elders, especially my grandmother and my grandfather, that they took me under their wing and to re-mentor me in a process that our ways should never be, forcibly confined and for them not to live again. I know a lot of the history of what happened to our people. And in this time, I want to take you to a brief history of where I come from and what had happened to our people of these lands prior to the coming of the non-Indigenous people from overseas. Our own history does not unfold you know, to where the first newcomer came by a guy by the name of, what was that guy's name that came on the boat?
Columbus.
Columbus. Christopher Columbus. He didn't land on these neck of the woods of the land. He landed further down south. But our first recollection of the boat people, what we call them, were the Vikings, and they were the ones that were depicted as pagans. That's where the word pagans, a non-believer of a god. So in being able to understand that paganism, that they held value, that everything had a spirit to it, that a certain god looked after these medicinal plants and looked after these certain trees and the environment. So they were quite respected on that. And in that turn, they developed a relationship with the First Nation people of these lands. And in that time, we didn't enter into treaty. We both shared knowledges. Our knives, and sigaigana, that the metal objects actually came from the Vikings, Mogomana. And this is where, we bartered with them and we taught them the laws of this land. So it was quite the relationship, and this is where we were included in being pagans, a non-believer of a god. So it's in this time that the French actually came, and when the French people came, they actually brought a disease off the boats, and in this time, prior to science coming onto Turtle Island, we had already understood how to care for our people. They came with a plague, and the First Nation people actually, doctored them into recovering and showing all these medicinal plants and whatnot. So in that further history that in going back where our knowledges had to go underground, and I actually come from a treaty territory, from the Treaty 5. There's two parts of this treaty. One is called the Christian treaty, and the other one is called the pagan treaty. I come from that pagan treaty of a non-believers of a god. So it's in this part that in 1876 and 78 that these treaties were signed. And Cross Lake, Bemidjigamat is where I come from. We're the only ones that were not forcibly baptized into entering treaty. So the rest of from 1 till 11, the exceptions of the pagan treaty that's only depicted in Canada as paganism of Treaty 5, that is where I stem from. My grandfather had told many stories about the journey and the hardships of what was going to be known as the era of our ways are going to go to sleep for many decades. And they said for 7 generations that our ways were going to go to sleep, that somebody was going to come and reawaken these ceremonies, the knowledge to these what you refer to as medicines. In our creation story, it takes 4 years to tell our story about our own creation story, whereas the non-Indigenous people, it's done through what is known as the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Bible, the Bible stories. We still hold at the utmost respect of other people's beliefs and religions, And an example to this is that when you take a look at the word Thunderbird in any dictionary, this is what the explanation will give you. It's a mythical character that the Indigenous people believe in. Now, a mythical character, we still hold respect. We don't call Jesus Christ a mythical character, That's how much respect that we have for other people and other nations. So it's in this time, we still hold value There was a study that was done back in 1995, I believe, and we were called as Indigenous knowledge keepers back in 95 because there was going to be a new law imposed to the First Nation peoples of Canada. Back in '88, the work started where they began to collect these all the seeds of within Canada, and it was federally funded. So all these seeds were kept in a bank, a seed bank. Well, they didn't know what to do with these seeds anymore, so a European company bought these. So the European company says, now we have all the rights to all the roots and medicinal plants in Canada. So anybody wanting to pick these medicinal medicines, they're going to have to acquire a permit from us. I said, no, 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 we dug our heels in. You only bought those seeds, you didn't buy the plants. It's just like saying you bought the sunflower seeds, you didn't buy the sunflower. So that came to an abrupt halt, and we abolished that. And one of the things that in that time we were let known that there was 128 pharmaceutical medicines on the Canadian market, and this does not include the genetic medicines that were on the market. Out of these 128, 114 of these came directly from the lands. And where they got this knowledge from was the First Nation people. So what differs from what the colonial world, what they call medicines, and that term, we can't really call it medicines, I say, because we define them differently. Within the mainstream medicines, what they've ostracized from this process is the spirit of it. They don't acknowledge the spirit of it. So it's more of a dyad process, I own this medicine, I made it up and I picked it and I put it in this capsule form. And whereas us, it's a trilateral process. We have not ostracized the spirituality. And don't confuse spirituality with religion. A spirit is something just like you have a unique spirit to yourself. And that's what spirituality is. It's being aware through our languages of what this unseen world is. And what an example to this unseen world is what we call the wind. You cannot see the wind, but you could feel it. You could feel it. You could see it actually moving trees. The birds use it, to have lift. So it's in this time, that's the unseen world. And we actually strived upon spirituality. So when you oppress something, and a lot of our things that we're coming back to, the term what you refer to love, and this love is given by our Creator, and it descends as Nehilwak, as a lame term, because we've been given many labels. The term creed, that's not part of our language. We can call Indians band members, Aboriginal, First Nation, and the list goes on and on. There's a total identity crisis, eh? So in reaffirming that, we're Isinuak, short-term parable Nehil. That's what that actually means. So in opposing these things and wanting to be able to understand further more of what the spiritual language provides, it actually goes into a sort of a matriotic that all interconnects together. It goes like this, and it evolves. So in order to have spiritual continuity, that evolvement has to always continuously move. So when you capture it into a capsule, the spirit is no longer there, it leaves, because it doesn't have freedom. you cannot oppress medicines and call them your own and put a label on them, you know. So this was, you know, we were forced to say this belongs to us. We had to take ownership of it, even though that we don't own anything. You know, the system has forced us to take ownership to our lands, to the medicines, to the ceremonies, to the language and culture and so forth, eh? Because that's the evolvement of what's to come, eh? So it's in this time that we begin to understand, you know, what the spiritual intent to these medicines. And there were stories in order for one to actually understand and comprehend, spiritually comprehend what we're talking about. You need the language to these, eh, to the land, in order to thoroughly, fully benefit from it. And and in saying so, I want to do a bit of a slide to what I'm talking about, but I'm going to allow my sister here to speak, and because she has so much to offer as bringing the balance between a man and a woman, male and female. That's, you know, that's the balance you're getting today, the best of both worlds. So a little bit of that history I wanted to share with you. You know, my very first language is Ininimuin is what we call it, eh? And the longer term meaning, it's directly connected from the heart, you know. This mite nani, and when it shakes, enanimuane, ininimuin is what that old language talks about. Our language is set up in parables and paradox, meaning we have now shortened it. An example to this is bisim, and right now there's many dictionaries on the market right now that have been developed throughout Cree territory, you know, the Cree dictionary. But it's always linear, that it's always accommodating the English language. It doesn't accommodate, you know, the inherent language. So when we say this term, this parable of bisim, it talks about simply, when you take a look at it in the dictionary, it'll say the sun. It doesn't provide any other information, the sun. But in our language, here's the full term of this parable, what it actually means. And it sounds like this. Now, to put to put the frosting on this, what it actually means. It means the spirit that's in the sky, because you feel this is shiwin, meaning energy. Energy is being brought down to us. Our creation story told us that our people used to live, 200 to 300 years old. They didn't get wrinkly skin. They didn't get gray hair. And evolvement of time and change, that we begin to have wrinkly skin and gray hair. So what this sun does for us, and this is the finishing product of this. So what happens is that we now begin to evolve growth. We know that we get light from here because it's based upon our tree. As long as the sun shines, we use the spiritual element in there. And it talks about the one that finishes Creator's creation of what it, is born into this world. So it finishes the work. A long time ago, before when a child was born, when he was born with jaundice, the elders would simply put it in the sun to allow the sun to finish Creator's creation. Now we weren't allowed to do that anymore because they didn't see it. It needed scientific proof. So now we have to rush, keep the baby in the hospital under this UV ray light, That's the difference, They wanted, impose science on it rather than the natural spiritual elements on what it was intended to be. So I want to briefly share right after, because I'm talking too much, And that's my biggest problem is I just love to share with the people that are looking and in search of these, of the knowledge. I speak my language at a very high pace. I mean, I speak a language that's above recognition. I have a lot of the elders come to me. And the reason why is this because I lost my language. My language actually went to sleep. I went through the residential school system and I was a day scholar. And then I was part of the 60s group where I grew up most of my life in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And they wanted to re-indoctrinate me back to my culture. They said, Jeff, you are an Indian. And I said, not me, I'm Latino, man, I'm Latino, That's what I thought because I spoke parts of the language, eh? I had the same color skin, I had to fit in somewhere. So I wanted to be Latino, I wanted to be Latin, but that was not my culture. And then I eventually found my way home in 1979. That was the longest journey I ever made, was walking from the United States back into Manitoba at the age of, a very young age, just to come home. I thought I was coming home to look for my mother and my birth father, my mother, and I was actually coming home to the lands, that was my mother and still is my mother, that greatest provider of today. Kikawi Noaski, what they refer to as Mother Earth. So this is what's really shaped my life, is that connection to our lands. So with that said, I'm going to be quiet here for about a couple minutes, and I'm going to allow my sister here to proceed.
I could listen to him forever. And I also want to thank Belle for the invitation and for setting it up for us to be here with you today. I'm always blown away by what Jeff has to share, because my journey began back in 1973 when I was in the mountains, and where I snagged my husband. He was dying from scurvy. That's my story anyway. Anyway, I have watched my nukom, my grandmother, run a sweat lodge when I was a little girl before I went to residential school, and she used to run her sweat lodge underneath the table in the porch. And they would cover the table with blankets and what have you, and they would lift up the slats off the dirt floor, and they had a hole there where they would my mushroom would bring the rocks in from the outside, because at that time our ceremonies had been attacked, and so because of the perceived paganism, and then I forgot about it because I went to residential school as well. And it took me a long time to return to find myself. And I had a wayward path getting there. And in Kootenai Plains, living in the mountains, we did a lot of walking. I'm a walker and I love it. And that's where my grandfather used to walk behind his plow many hours. And my father was a great hunter and walked miles on the land. And so I learned to appreciate that walk, and it has kept me on the land. And I crave for it in the wintertime because it's often too cold to venture outside. But so back in the early 70s, I started to dream about my grandparents, not only the fact that I would be a writer and that it would take me all over the place, but it also brought ceremony into my psyche. And psyche actually means wind, soul, and spirit. So when we go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, we're actually changing not only our behavior, but we're honoring that soul and that spirit and that wind that we breathe. And that's the energy that that Jeff is talking about. So it's been a long journey gathering my own medicine through psychiatry. My therapist was a Jungian therapist, and my psychologist, and going back to my elders and learning how to reclaim who I was and who I am this present day. And so I cremated my husband. We've been together for 48 years, so I've dragged him along, and he's dragged me along all over the place. So it's been a blended marriage of both cultures, and it's been a challenge, and it's been a wonderful experience. And when our elder passed, he was a war veteran, fought in the Second World War. He was our chief, and then he became our spiritual leader. And when he passed, we both, my partner and I, felt at loss, because we thought, oh, okay, who's going to continue teaching us? And with the various ceremonies, I have prayed for language. I have prayed for ceremony. I have given thanks, just to fast and give thanks, because I'm so privileged to live this life of breath, and with the natural environment, and with the people that I love. And Jeff came into my life, and another elder has said to me, you've got to find other elders to continue your teaching. So over the years, I've had various elders, and sometimes, and you have to be so careful on if you don't follow the elders, you listen to their teachings and you discern what the teachings are. All the elders I've been involved with have become my friends, and I've been fortunate for that, because they don't like to be put on a pedestal, and I don't like to be put on a pedestal. In fact, one of the elders said to me, and to a group of us, she said, "Don't put me on a pedestal. I can be a bitch too." And I've never forgotten that. So, and when I would hesitate, she would say, "Just do it, Louise." So, and of course, the elders would also say, "Well, what do you think?" And the other thing that they would say was, "It's up to you." And one of the other things that I love that I hear Jeff talk about a lot, and I heard this week through another artist friend when I was on Zoom, and he was a young elder, and I just loved him. I just fell in love with him because he talked like my brother here. Recognize your dream, understand your passion, live it. And so I tell people, don't let anything and anybody stop you, because this is your journey. And what you gain from yourself, eventually you learn to give back. But we have to learn to nurture ourselves in order to give back. Because if we don't nurture ourselves, we're dysfunctional, and we can't give in a healthy way. And so it's important to honor that spirit, that wind, that soul. And so I'll give it back to him. He's such a great speaker.
Oh, gee whiz. Ayaw. Mistoi. Ega kiwe ko tig mamitoy chika na nuka di sila. Dan siya mga di pisit no kumpan. Nina, kag-Wastesian. Na tukman edit mo eta chika wawit tamuy chika. Dan siya mag-iskay ni Miswin. Gusto tamawin. Mina tan sige ise. Witchet itya sinyo. Apugoya kape pagusay bestan sige ise ni suga mo. I sit here, my mind races back as to what my grandparents told me, what my late brother told me, and some of the teachings, how we must connect with one another. And when they talk about this blood memory, and I think that the memory wise of where one stores this knowledge, it's always in the water, the spirit. You know, Our way of teaching is different from the colonial way of teaching. I've yet to open a book to you to read to you what this knowledge is about, because it's stored within the water system. And in order to be equal, the colonial way of education is linear. I'm going to give you the orders and you do it. Basically, it's like this one way. Our way is more of a trilateral process of learning, because the spiritual intent we've not taken out of it. So when we sit with our elders, and I was really, really blessed to have 5 elders constantly in front of me, teaching me, one student, and to have 5 elders walk with me throughout my journey. And today it's a little bit more difficult. You have one elder and 27 students. It's very difficult to connect with them. But it's in this balance of what this water can retain, and this water, this stotama, when we don't have the concepts or the understanding of it to be able to move forward, this is the reason why we enter into ceremony. We go ask this one, the creator, give us this knowledge. What do we do next? What is a ceremony to us? A ceremony is a spiritual act to acknowledge a process way of life. That's what a ceremony is. And it's not getting a trophy or a certificate like that you're a doctor or a nurse, eh? It's spiritually acknowledging the life inside. So when we talk about this memory, when our way of teaching was always in this way, balance of water. Today I understand which teachings to give young children, because if I say to a child, a 5-year-old, what's 59 times 104? Their water cannot comprehend that. They can't balance it. It's about balancing, eh? They can't balance such a high figured number. So again, we have to be prudent as to how, because if it's like this, you have your instructor up here, this water, or same thing when you have a boss who you're working for. It's in balance, and the water cannot filter. So what happens here is fear, and going to school, you fear because you're going to get a chronological number to say you're going to get this 70%. You need to have this certain percentage of a number. So this is the chronological way of teaching, where our elders always taught us and nobody got left behind. That's why we sat crisscross with our elders right on the ground. Their water levels were at the same level. We didn't put them on a pedestal, eh? We didn't fear, Again, in the process of learning, one should not be imposed upon fear of failing. One may be slower than the other one that excels, but we don't leave anybody behind in our way of teaching, eh? And that's the way different from the colonial world versus our world, eh? We don't leave anybody behind. So it's this water that gives us life. And when they talk about our treaties, they say as long as the sun shines, I gave you an understanding to that, because it's a giver of life. Without that sunlight, we will not be able to see anything of what Creator's creation is. The second thing is, as long as the rivers flow, that's part of our treaty. They didn't talk about the natural waters that flow out there, out on the rivers. They talked about these certain rivers that run through our body, because at any given time from 70 to 90%, we're filled with water, and they're always flowing. You take it in and it flows right through you. Same when a spiritual life comes, especially the women, when they give birth, water comes first in new life. Eh? So they talked about these rivers, and I was actually doing a talk up in about 15, maybe even 17 years ago up in Toronto with doctors and physicians, because they were actually at that time wanting to know Indigenous knowledge and these symmetrical diamonds that we use, in our patterns, such as the shirt that you see here. These are symmetrical pointed diamonds, eh? We call that kashipigahigiak, and I do a lot of PowerPoints with the star blanket. This is, and some of you may have seen a star blanket and why we call it a saga book. This was a blueprint to a way of life because we had to follow a certain law of how Creator created things, and we could not change those out of the way that we're given. As the old man would say, I don't know what's wrong with this colonial world. They'll take this blanket and they'll cut it off here, and then they'll re-sew it back on here to have daylight savings time, So it's the same side blanket, eh? I don't know why they changed, because that's what they call chronologic, eh? And this chronologic system, you can change it, eh? From even the marks that you get on your grades, eh? There was a tune that was called by Johnny Cash, they call me by a number, not a name, and that's how this chronological world evolves around, from education to, they keep track of you with these numbers, even with my status as a Indian status card, they don't know me by my name. They will know me by this number. Even in the, penitentiary system, they call me by a number, not a name. So it's this chronological world that evolves around. And in our way, our teachings never stop till we are done living in this world, that's why we don't give out PhDs. And it's a time that we can recognize what is of value. Today, there is a difference between intelligence and intellect. My grandfather said to me one time, "Grandson, if I was to give you this knife and this axe, would you be able to walk into the bush and survive for the rest of your remaining life?" I said no, because I was afraid of the bush. I was afraid of the wolf or the bear. I didn't know what to eat. He says, "I will teach you." Today, if I had an axe and a knife, I can walk into the bush and I would surely survive. That's intelligence. Intellect is up here. And this is the colonial world of teaching intellect, intellectual properties, eh? But if this whole thing was to crash, if we lost all power to the city of Saskatoon, what would happen? You would declare a state of emergency. You wouldn't have the common sense to go break up some branches off your back tree and start making a fire. See, that's the difference here. And when we come to these, the intelligence of working with these, the knowledge of the land to these, what you refer to as medicines, eh? That is where it's at. That's the difference. So intelligence is here, intellect here. So even these spiritual properties such as love, kindness, respect, they all live here. I can try to love you out of here, out of my wallet, out of my good looks, out of my arrogance, But love is actually here. Respect, kindness is here. That's the difference between these two worlds. And what we wanted to share is the knowledge from here on survival. These ceremonies, the language provides and dictates a process already set in motion because this language was given by our creator. So that's the difference in balancing water. It's always about a balancing. The old people always say, I remember the time when I began to do my studies. I remember when heart diseases began in my community. I remember the first sign of sugar diabetes in my community, high blood pressure. I remember when these things arrived in my community, and not to only say these diseases, but also suicide when it came to the people. These never existed. So I began to do my own studies. I began to, about obesity. I asked the elders, when did our people used to be so healthy a long time ago? And they said, oh, it was such a hard life, Well, the only thing hard about it, the elders would say, is you had to work for your food, You had to work to stay warm. And it provided your whole vascular system of healthiness, because you were constantly moving. And these things begin. He says, I remember the time that people began to become obese is when the Europeans introduced the very first frying pan to our people. People started frying their foods. They no longer smoked them. They no longer, everything was fried. That's when obesity began. He says, I remember, meaning high blood pressure. It came when the introduction of canned food products and salt were introduced to the people. They had very healthy teeth. Then came the sugar that was introduced to the people. Flour, bannock is not a part of our tradition. The flour products, it comes from a different language, bannock. That's not a Cree word. But when these things began to be introduced, that's when the health problems began. Suicide came in 1980, in the early 1980s. That's when it entered the First Nation. Now it's rampant. And the reasoning behind that is that there was something spiritually taken away. And when something, it's like taking your child away from you. You long and you miss these things and you become oppressed. You've been suppressed into a way of life. These make-believe cages that we were forced to live in, which are known as reservations. And we had a zookeeper. And our zookeeper is the federal government that took away every living thing around us, started defecating the lands, mining, the tree industry, the mining and so forth. Even now the waterways are being blocked off by hydroelectric development. And now this is what the people are grieving about and don't know how to properly grieve because their ceremonies were taken away and their natural medicines were taken away and they don't know how. So when you've been so oppressed for 150 some odd years, you no longer belong. You're made to feel you don't belong. I don't want to live in this world anymore. That is when suicide began. Our young people said, we're going to teach you what we are missing. Their lives, they started committing suicide. So this involvement, and it's still today, we are led to believe that we are the poorest and the bottom, that we don't belong here in Canada. And that's the truth about it. It's sometimes so sickening, that who prospers from our creator granted rights, from our own sovereignty. I was listening to Trudeau yesterday, the other day, says, oh, we want, the Ukraine, we want their sovereignty, we stand with their sovereignty. And I was just saying, scratching my head, oh, what about us? What about our sovereignty, eh? Yeah, you're missing the picture here. Why are you, giving somebody else your support to their own sovereignty when you don't even look into your own backyards, eh? So in this knowledge, now it's wanting to be vast. I want to tell you a little bit about this pandemic that hit us and it's been plaguing us. And in this time, I want to take you and journey you back to 1917 when the Spanish flu hit. In that time, this pandemic that occurred, we were left and all they shipped us was body bags to every First Nation. And this is what occurred. All the ministries, meaning that the churches ran from the First Nations. The RCMP, the Indian agent, took off on them. We were left to fend on ourselves. Well, this pandemic was supposed to wipe out every Indian that was around it. So we had to highly depend on the land. We understood how this occurred in our own human anatomy. And that's the gift from our creator, to be able to understand what the compository, the inside and the outside of what the human anatomy in our language is. Through ceremony, we went and asked for these things, and they came through reams. They came and told us what to use. We survived that pandemic, and there we learned what these pandemics were. And in our language, we call this Ochinewin, meaning when you step out of balance of what Creator had created for you. So within the four-legged and the flight beings, there are certain animals that we are unable to eat because there's so much of value, spiritual value, but we can't eat a fox. We can't eat a skunk. We can't eat bats. We call these ones Wastesicoot, not to bother them. The language tells us not to bother them. Kinetic belongs here. Pagosis, meaning we don't eat mice. If you're going to, and the closest word in the English language of Ochinewin is you're going to create a pathogenic. It's going to be an airborne disease. And it's going to destroy you. So from the Spanish flu, we understood how this evolved. And within this, what they refer to as the sinus cavity, that's where it all begins, is in the sinus cavity. How and all these pandemics began to evolve was inside the sinus cavity, a common cold. Then within the ceremonies, they foretold in 1980 that there was other pathogenics that were going to come through this ceremony. They knew it. They said one was going to come from the pig, which they referred to as the swine flu. Be prepared with these medicines. We gathered them. We began a process because we knew that they were coming. The second one was the bird virus, which was known as H1N1. We already prepared for that. This time they didn't call it, a pandemic, because it was just a bird flu. It was new. It was not a COVID mark, but a lot of people succumbed from it. So they said, our elders said, what's going to happen? It's going to start to develop in your sinus. And when you're sleeping, it's going to trickle down to here and begin to affect the lungs. So panagoge. And when it's out here, we see magishiwa, meaning they told us, theoretically, that what's going to happen to these lungs when they're starving of oxygen and blood flow to them, that these lungs are now going to intake from the body because it's Eushimagak, meaning meaning you're now taking fluids from your own bodily fluids from inside because the lung is shaped like it acts like a sponge. So they gave us these medicines, how to take this water out of here. And we were given 3 of these medicines, how to take the water out of the lungs. I'm not going to share this medicine with you because it's going to take up too much time, eh? But we know how to take the water out of the lungs. And what happens again, all these ones now, COVID came, because it was one of these animals that we were not supposed to bother. Some, have speculations it came from the bat or the snake or all compository. It was, that this was a super agent that was created, eh? And we already knew that was going to come. And they called it So we have now prepared this. We prepared for the coming of this because all of these pathogenics started in the sinus. And we knew already the knowledge back from 1917. And we still carry that knowledge today. Eh? So that's a little bit about medicine. I'm gonna shoot back over here to my sister. She's beautiful and she keeps, throwing this over to me and just wanting to listen to me. You should have just stayed home, I said. Listen to me over here. Anyway, here's Louise.
Such incredible gifts of information, and there's so much to learn and so much to pass on to the children, the 7 generations ahead. One of the things that I walk with in my car and in my person is tobacco. And over the years in walking in Saskatchewan and with the Saskatchewan Folklore Society, we've come to different sites in this province where there's all kinds of medicines and all kinds of history. And I walk with my ancestors, and they come to me in dreams in some of these places that we walk. And dreams have to live somehow. We have to learn to decipher these dreams and learn to give thanks for these happy dreams, these nightmares. They're all gifts. They're gifts to oneself. However we receive them, even the negative stuff that we present to ourselves are gifts to oneself. And sometimes I go into doldrums. I call my COVID days of being pissed off at COVID, my doldrums. It's been a long 2 years, but and mostly I've been okay because I know how to entertain my spirit and to walk with it. But I do have days where I want to socialize and to see my relatives, and I've not been able to go home to many of the funerals and to see my relatives off. But I know they're about because they're in the wind. Everything that has ever survived and lived, including all the reptiles and the insects and the dinosaurs, have left their breath in the wind. And it floors me to know that a lot of people don't recognize that all of these living entities that have long passed leave their spirit in the wind. When our elder went to the other life, he told us, just talk to the wind you'll find me there. I remember him saying that. And so we too will leave our breath in that wind, and not all goes to waste. We are always present in that spirit. Um, there's always so much to share in such a short period of time. And I don't know if anybody has any questions for us at this moment, or how much time that we have with you. How much time do we have with us?
You do have another 22 minutes with us, Lois, and if you want to pause at this time, I know Jeff and yourself have shared some great things, and persons may want to ask questions. I think we could pause and just open up for some conversation, some thoughts. And just to say, we have not yet closed, but I want to say thank you so much, Jeff. I heard lots of things that resonated with me, resonated with my own knowledge, and just the spirit of the sun and the life-giving nature of the sun. And yeah, I can definitely identify when the baby have jaundice, you sun them. That's what you do. And it heals the jaundice, make sure the liver is okay. But now science has replaced that and say keep them in an incubator and shine an artificial light on them. So thank you so much. And I know others may want to share, so we're going to open it up so where you can turn your cameras on, turn your microphones on, the chat box, and feel free to ask questions. Raise your hand, send a reaction, send an emoji. We want to hear from you. Let's use our language. Let's use our words to convey how we feel, and just to share with our guests.
I'd kind of like to ask a question, because you talked about some of the animals, that you were to bother with, but like I wondered about the bear. Like it's like so sacred in the culture, and like what are, like I know there's lots of teachings around the bear, and someone was saying to me, oh, they were going to eat bear, and I was like, aren't you, I can't imagine, like I was like, aren't you not supposed to eat bear? But is that a crazy question? I don't know, just came to my mind about bear.
I just wanted to respond to that. Many of one of the greatest knowledges comes from the bear, eh? And the stories that evolve around the keeper of the medicines and so forth, eh? And this is where that word comes from, muskigi, eh? Meaning the medicines. It is from this bear because he's quite knowledgeable, because he's able to understand all 6 nations. And when I talk about nations, meaning that he understands the fish nation because he embodies them, eh? He understands the trees and plant nations, meaning that he embodies them. And he also understands the insect nations. He eats the insects, eh? And the bird nation, he understands them very well, because he's able to consume them and how to look after them. And the 5th one is the human nation, the people of the land. He understood them very well, eh? And because there's in our creation story that evolves around them. So once you become to know them, that in time that only certain people were given the right to eat this animal, just like there's certain elders' food, there's a certain, when you go through these rites of passage, and we have 10 stages in our rites of passage rather than from a colonial term of just 4 stages, children, child, teenager, adult, and elder. These are just chronological identifications of numbers. And why I say this is because an elder is from 65 till they're done in this world. It only depicts a number within that category. Same with an adult. A child is from 0 till 12 years old. It's a chronological number. It doesn't give you, it doesn't define respect. It doesn't define, how much education you have. It simply defines a number. So within this time when we talk about the bear, that at this level, the elders were allowed to eat, like the sturgeon. It was not for a child to eat. It was for the elders' food. And same thing with this one. What defines as Nehilwak, because out of all these, 6 nations, we were given the fourth element, meaning the bear has a mind, a body, and a spirit. That's all they have. That's all they occur. What defines us, what Creator gave us so special is a spiritual helper. We call this Pawagan. That's what defines us as Nehilwak, these 4 parts to us, eh? So within this one, it defines even the food that we eat. When we say wapus, rabbit, it talks about a spiritual food that's meant for this one here, the spiritual helper, because this is the one that leaves, that goes into those spiritual realms. This is the one that carries that name. My name that my grandfather gave me was Kaskawat Nuyamau, the one that's able to penetrate frost of something that has been frozen in time. Now that's a long term, eh? But that's what Kaskawat Nuyamau means. So it's in this time that this one leaves. That's why we were told that this one always wants to fend for you. Our elders have told us when you embody a certain spirit in you, it can give you good medicine or bad medicine. We know that there's a spirit in alcohol and drugs, So what happens when you embody alcohol, your spiritual helper leaves and you have 3 to try and fend for themselves. So this is the one that actually our elders always told us, never go to sleep angry. Do not go to sleep because you don't know what your spiritual helper can do. Because you can go out there and set a trap for somebody to step on, to have and hit hard times. So that's what defines it as Nehilwak. The human race has gotten forth a spiritual helper that can go to these visitations to the ones that have left, that have left the world, through death. We still dream about them. We're still connected to them, eh? So they're unrestricted ones that are able to eat that bear, because it embodies. That's why the oils and the certain parts that are very strong for us, eh? Especially the bear grease, eh?
Thank you.
Wow, so much rich knowledge that we need it. We need to sit with you guys more often, so we can know the different levels and really how everything works together. I have a question about alcohol. As you mentioned it, you said the spirit, so we have these 4 elements, 4 important elements, and when we consume alcohol, this element goes. Is that in all properties? Sometimes, when the wine is fermented and it's just fermented wine, you have juice, and then you have alcohol, which is when it's fully turned into alcohol. So just to maintain good health and wellness and to be in balance with our spirit, should we be drinking, even just as a recommendation, not as a prescription, how do we take alcohol in a safe way, or products with alcohol, or is it a no?
Again, the way I would answer this is that the old man used to tell me that there's a balance in everything. There's a balance. Me, I could never find that balance. I overindulge, just like food, money, greed. You overindulge, it's going to do you harm. Same with the balance of food, eh? If you overtake it, you become obese. Then you begin to have those health issues, eh? So there is a balance, within me, I can't handle alcohol, all because I become a total different person. I become quite sexy, I think, anyway. I become very good looking, irresistible, and all that, eh? At least that's what it makes me think. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a time for also, to be able to smile and enjoy the talks, eh?
Yeah. I want to address it too. Many years ago, I haven't touched alcohol in over 40 years, and we were traveling in Nova Scotia, and they have beautiful blueberry fields, and they make blueberry wine. And I thought, oh, well, I wouldn't mind having a sip of blueberry wine. And I took this much, okay, that much. It's not much. And consider this, I had already probably been in ceremony and alcohol-free, drug-free for years. Within half an hour, I was sick to my stomach all night. And my spirit didn't like it, and my body hated it. And so when you're in ceremony with your body, your spirit is present, and it will tell you, don't touch. Even now, my partner who studies and teaches alcohol prevention, it causes cancer, no matter how much you consume. And people don't know this, and the industries keep pushing. And I remember being on a board with physicians, and I had been taking my addictions training and become much more aware of it. And I told those physicians, we need to get alcohol out of the picture. I was laughed off that committee, and that was almost maybe over 20 years ago. And but now it's the talk of the town, and it's high time. We Native people should not be supporting those industries that destroy our health. So it's a challenge.
Thank you, Jeff and Louise. I appreciate that. I appreciate both perspectives. Yeah, I appreciate that, definitely. We do have some persons. We do have more questions coming up for you. We just had to change the settings where persons could unmute themselves. I think they may be able to do that now. So we may have a few persons just raise their hands, and then I'll tell you the order in which you go. Okay, so Randy, could you go ahead and type your question and I'll read it out, please?
Yeah, question in the chat.
Put the question in the chat and I'll read it aloud. We have another 8 minutes. I think we can take 2. All right, so the question is traditional healing versus Western healing. What's the difference? And I would more say to add to it, how can we collaborate? So what's the difference? So that's his question. Traditional healing versus Western healing. What's the difference?
Western healing, and this is something that I've only been told by the ones that practice the Western medicines. It's based upon science, like scientific proof. But with this science, how one reacts to that incoming of that treatment, we all differ. Like one pill, this certain medicine is not going to cure one person. They have to literally try different methods till it works. That's the difference here. So one of the things that differs from this traditional way is that we have not ostracized, we have not taken prayer out of the doctrine. Whereas, nobody's going to come around there smudge or say 10 the Hail Marys or whatnot until you're ready to pass on. It's that, that's that trilateral process I'm talking to you about, the physical, that the medicine, and also the spiritual part. Whereas in the doctoral field, you only have these two here, just that the medicine and the prescriber, the doctor. That's the difference, So when we come with the lodges, and this is the uniqueness. And I was just asked, what's the efficacy of this sweat lodge? What's the proof value and what it actually does? And I said, it's like saying trying to define which eyelash is going to be lift by the wind today, you know? And you don't know if it's going to be the smudges, the songs, you know, the prayers, you know, or the rocks or the energy that's in there that's going to actually, because our people were so profound and understood about energy, and they knew how to work with this energy, because one, it displaces energy, but they also were able to put that energy back, you know. So and a common value to what the Jesuit priest understood about what they saw, and this is, you know, a term that's used by the Jesuits, you know, priests. They said, as we observe these peoples of this land, we are unaware as to what they are doing. As we onlook to them from a distance, they seem to take these willows and intertwine them where they create this little lodge. And they further take these hot heated stones in there. And furthermore, they take their sick and their unhealthy in there. And when they exit, they come out of there perspiring of sweat. We can only assume and call this a sweat lodge. But in our language, it doesn't depict a sweat lodge, but that's the way people are carrying on with this knowledge, eh? In our language, we call it matutsan. So what happens here is that our elders understood these energies and how this energy was going to react. And when I talk about this energy, you know, I talk quite a bit about the energy of water. So, you know, in frustration, because, you know, 80 some odd% of our bodies are made up of water. So what happens if I was display this negative energy to you? Your body's going to receive this energy and your water is going to react. So when you look at frozen water in time, it's going to look like a snowflake, eh? Remember the paper machetes we used to make these snowflakes, eh, in the winter time, and that's what your water looks like when it crystallizes. So what happens when it receives negative energy? These spiritual microbes turn into like little snakes, little worms. That's how effective, and that's why you begin to shake, eh? When trauma happens, your body shakes, because, and this is the energy our people understood how to work with, eh? To be able to calm this energy down. So this is the value of why our people smudge, eh? They now can now take this energy that's been, you know, been in this way. Because when a body has been traumatized, or even the visual sight, or what you hear, or even read, your body's going to go into the straight state of trauma. So when trauma, you know, in our language, we call it kakaskotogo. So our language always understood what trauma was. So in order, when the body's in trauma, you need to heat the body core up. You know, it doesn't matter. It could be, you know, 90 above outside at a hot sun, that body will begin to shut down. So they knew how to work with this energy, eh, without using any steroidal, you know, injections, you know, epinephrine or whatever they used to, you know, to bring this body down. We used and understood energy, and that's the difference between this Western world versus the traditional world, eh? I don't know if that answered your question. I did the best I could.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so interesting. We do have another question. I'm not sure if you can unmute though.
Yes, I can.
Oh, you can. Awesome.
Yes.
Asking your question. Ask your question,
Fantastic.
please.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insight. I want to honor all of your ancestors and my ancestors, and the ancestors of the lands that the people in this webinar are standing on at this moment. And I want to ask your insight about a larger project that I'm starting. It's a nonprofit that's focused on building a network of continental coalitions of Indigenous leaders to advocate for ourselves. So a network from Africa, a network from Asia, a coalition from Europe, and then to share our knowledge to protect our lands and wisdom and to advocate to policymakers. Can you think of any risks of trying to do something so ambitious, so big? And I can clarify if you need more information.
Wow. Oh,
That's
that's a huge ambition.
Yes. And it's
you know, one of the things that we were just actually talking about this in the ceremony last night with some of the elders that were there. And one of the things that we come to realize is that we are now living in an era of almost like you know, being able to visualize the unconscious state of where we're at generally as the whole world, as what's happening. There was an elder that I sat with last night, and in this dream he said, you have to adopt these 4 nations. He says, a black man, you have to have a black brother. You have to have an Asian brother, a white brother, and you are the 4th one, to come together to combat our world knowledges of how we can comprehend health diseases. By unilaterally coming together to respect each other's ceremony. And I said, wow, you know, that's a hell of a vision you have there. And all of a sudden you come up with this, eh? And again, there is something that you got to watch in sharing this. And the reason why I say this, because there's what they call property of ownership, eh? That the government might want to shut you down for what you're, you know, proposing. They have no control of it. You know where I'm going with this, eh?
I do, and I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. Yes.
Yeah, because they're going to want to shut you down, just like they shut down the guy that was producing, you know, another method with growing corn to make fuel, eh? They shut him down. So if it doesn't work to their best of interest, they will shut you down. So be very cautious, and that's what you know, our brother was telling us last night. We got to be very cautious of how we move forward. So in wanting to move forward, never forget about the ceremonies, eh? Whether it's from an Asian, you know, African, you know, white or First Nation.
Yes.
Have the spirit, never ostracize the spirit in this, you know, intention, eh?
Thank you.
Okay.
Is it possible to have your email to follow up if I have any other questions, where you can give, you know, a few moments of wisdom as I'm advancing on?
Now you can get a hold of Val. I'll leave her my email there and whatnot.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll do it through her. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Matateraba. Be well.
Yeah. Wastesicoot.
Amen.
We're coming to, we're just past 6 o'clock. So is there anyone else that would like to ask a question or comment before we wrap up?
Gina, I do. This is Kathy.
Kathleen.
Yeah.
Hi, Kathleen. My favorite person in Prince Albert.
Is this just about over? It's sort of a statement I'm making, but a question too. First of all, I want to really thank both of you, Jeff and Louise, for this just amazing presentation. I've learned so much and really grateful for what you had to say. But it's a question, it's to do with a bear. My youngest son died of brain cancer, but before he died, I'm interested in blood memory, and I'm wondering if this is an example of blood memory. But what happened was Martin couldn't speak Cree, but before he died, he started speaking in Cree, and he told me that he was a grandfather now, and his name was Wastesicoot. And I understood the Musqueam part meaning bear, but I didn't know what Sakituwin meant. And I don't know how Martin got the language before he was passing on. And so I asked my friend Willie Irvine, what does Sakituwin mean? What's he trying to say? And he said, love. He's telling me his name is Bear Love. And so it's always been a mystery to me how he knew Cree when he never spoke it all his life. And I don't know how to speak Cree. I forgot my language when I was 4. So I was wondering if you could give me some insight. What is this blood memory is what I'm wondering about.
Well, you know, in this leadership, I just wanted to, because I was wanting to, I don't want to leave you guys just yet to leave you wondering about this bear, eh? So this Sagituan talks about everything that where love comes from, and this is why our people wear these flower patterns, eh? You know, that in growing up, when I was told I was a Cree, and these are what defines Crees are the flower patterns that they wore on their jackets, on their moccasins and stuff like that. And I said, well, I didn't think that was cool when I was young, because I wanted a buffalo or a bear, you know, and all these really macho symbolic things that were out there. And I didn't want this, it was kind of girlish to me to start wearing flower, you know, patterns on me that define it, to tell people who I am as a Cree person. So it was explained to me the reason why, you know, this all these, when you talk about blood memory, you know, as where Creator had given you life, you were born with these things. The elders always told us, you were born with your language. You know, we understood that the cosmos, you know, all these four universes that are beyond what defines our creation story. And there are 4 universes, you know, this universe that we live in, you know, you see the spiritual markers in the sky, you know, such as the Big Dipper and so forth. That's where all these knowledge and the spiritual stories come from. But they also come from that second universe, the third universe, and where our Creator sits in that 4th universe, eh? So it's a long story. That's why it takes 4 years. So when we talk about this Maswa, he was the one that arose, and that this is where the knowledge, you know, has always come from, and receiving that knowledge, you know, we have so much respect for the bear. I have so much respect for it, that he's the keeper of the land. That's why I don't want to ever take its life. I'm an avid hunter, a provider, and so forth. I will not take a bear's life, all because it stands so much to preserve. And before I leave, I hope we're not going to get cut off here right away.
I don't think
Okay, can I just go into just a short power presentation to understand a little bit of what our medicines mean to us? I'm going to take this here, and where am I at here?
There should be a little green button at the bottom, and it'll say
Yeah.
share screen with a arrow. Can you see that? Should be just along the bottom of your screen, maybe.
I don't see you. At the top.
And you know what? I'll make sure that you guys are hosts. As yeah, you should be able to share.
Where does he find it?
Just hang on, you guys. This is something that I wanted to. Okay. It must be. Okay. Okay.
Can you see it?
So, where's this one here? Where's the share button? I am now. This technology is something else, eh?
It is.
Okay, no, share. Share. And right there. Okay, share.
Got it, okay.
Can you guys see this?
Yay!
Got it. Hold on. Hold on.
Oh my goodness, you have a bear right there.
Yeah. So F5. This is a new technology. I'm very grateful to have grandchildren. They're the ones that are my ITT techs.
So you can go right on the bottom. Would it be your,
Okay, here we go.
there you go.
So this word, it doesn't define like the term medicines to us, eh? And within our stories, this becomes the understanding, and this is how our elders were, they shared spiritual stories in order for us to have knowledge as to the intent to these things. So this word parable refers to the traditional medicines that are on the land and how they evolved, eh? Because within our creation stories, the animals were here first prior to mankind coming, eh? And that's the way it goes. So within here, the parable term mustigi, and it's a short word, a parable. So within our language here, where this bear's creation story came from was from the grass. We say maskosi, maskosia, hence the word maskwa. So within this little one that went to the east, and this is how this I'm not going to tell it. I'm going to try my darndest to try and articulate this in the English language, because this story was told to me time and time over again within the homeland language. Eh? So within this one here, they call this one out here in the west, they call it wagayus. Out east, they call this opatsawanisis, and that term opatsawanisis, once it crawls up a tree,
Oh no.
because what happens here is the mother will make a sound, an alarming sound, and it sounds like this, like that, eh? And right away they know that there's danger here, and they'll run up this tree. And this is why that's where this word wagayus. Okay, so this parable, the very first one that my grandmother talked to me about was this little bear, and he spoke when his life was given from the grass, eh? That's why we call it maskosi, maskosis. This word bear does not come from, that language does not come from this island, of Turtle Island. So here where this one he spoke, umisigito, manina, isipit metsaman katisip mamimi tigo masipi. Eguteni newin teshipe maskawata mo ga sinyo ga upetago tetu taski. So this little one, when he was given life, he says, I will follow this eastern river and I will go give strength to the land for the people that are coming from the spirit world, so that they may utilize the lands to the east for their health and benefits. That's why we call it, that's what he said. The second one that was given life from the grass was the black bear. And he also spoke, he said, my grandmother, because there was only one language spoken here on this island. And he said, Uteni lagatini waguma, eguteni stawi sepe tian, umamisisi eviette, nawetisa man, eguteni stevinte sepe maskawata mo gaisinyo. Wastesicoot ni uhegutawi utut na masut mayoyawen, kagigegutatawi pamitamwak. And the black bear spoke, he says, I will follow the southern waters. I too will go give strength to the land for the people to use for their health and well-being. So the next one that was to speak, oh, for some reason this is not going here. was this one here. Wastesicoot is the big bear. This one also spoke, the third one that was given life. Umishigi toina, utenina, kapise sagit tawage, utenina wishipuetian. Ete pagay tamanu wachia misheta vigakuspata vito taman mishuiniste ewinte shipe maskawat tamuak. I sin you askinu kitawiapachita. As this one said, I will follow the western waters, and I will go give strength to the land for the people to use for their health and well-being, because I have the most courageous one that I'm able to climb all these terrain over here, the mountains. That's why we call this Wastesicoot, and which is known as the grizzly bear. I almost forgot what it's called in English. So the last one to speak was that this next one here is Wastesicoot. And this one was given life through the grass too in the winter time, eh? And this one we call it Wastesicoot. Umisigito, this is what he said. Uteni nagishipiga magnito utan. Eguteni sta ewinte shipe maskawa tamuak. Kiwet nunyu. Utemishiwe. Katisi ininyu atigo maski. Eguteni sta. Maga pege gomina niwiten. Egani newi kawishimuan. Kadike wipirage gote. Aisinu spiati kiweto ewigiskenawachi. Egote tati siwit. The last one to get up from the grass in the winter time was this white bear. He says, I will go to the edge of the waters in the north. And we call that Kisipigamag. He says, I will go give strength to the land all the way to the frozen barren land. And I will go give strength to the natural medicines for the people to utilize. So it went in 4 directions, but he also said, the white bear said, I will not go to sleep. I will await for the people when they begin their journey home. I will show them to the star world as they make their journeys home. That's why in our language, this direction, we say kiwet no kiwe, where we go home to. That is the doorway that we use back to the spirit world. And it's not a magneto pointing a direction, eh? So this is why where the bears evolved from these 3 species here, the little brown one, the black one, and the big brown one, because their life came from the grass, because they're the ones, were the keepers of the medicines. And when this grass and when these medicines in the fall time begin to lay down, the grass will lay down. That's the reason why they have to go to sleep. So within this language, we use this bear as part of this muskigi, traditional medicines. So the word, the parable must mean, it's a small parable meaning muskawao. The translation refers to the spiritual power and strength. That's what must means, muskawao. That's the whole translation to that parable of must say. So gigi, the second part to this is, it talks about the translation refers to the homeland, gigi. So when we put this word together, hence the word muskigi, and what this means in our language, you know, how we were made to understand the spiritual power and strength of our homelands refers not only to the trees and plants, but also the animals, fish, and the birds that we consume, the lenders of life. So that's what muskigi, that's why we don't, hence like medicine, we don't, you know, parts per million and so forth, we don't break it up into that part, because we know that there's a spirit in it. You cannot overtake natural medicines, and you know, and you use your heart when you put these things together. That's how the old people stemmed it from, eh? So that's the story I wanted to share with you. And with that said, I think our time is almost up now, eh?
Yes.
So
Thank you so much.
before we leave here, I just want to say it's been a well afternoon, and I'm very grateful and feel very honored that you've asked me to come and share some knowledge with you. And hopefully one day that our vision as traditional knowledge keepers, that our ways will be allowed into that Western world to work closely together with Western doctors, eh? That is our vision.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you so much, Louise, for coming and sharing your knowledge. I just feel really honored and privileged to be in your presence, although it's just a video, but I know where you are. So thank you all the participants who came also to the presentation. Thank you to Charlene and Donna and Kathleen and Diana, and also Val for sure for helping us get the presentation together. I really appreciate everybody's work on this. And for all the participants that are here, I hope that you can attend some of the Indigenous Achievement Week. We're honoring Indigenous students and their achievements in the university, and you know, hoping for the vision, hoping that this vision will come to fruition, and that these knowledges, we can work together the way we need to heal heal our planet and the people on the planet. So many thanks, and thank you, Val, thank you, Jeff, thank you, Louise, and everybody involved.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.